The views, opinions, and content provided by our host and guests are just that, opinions and views that are not intended to malign any group, religion, business, individual, or thing. That said, please know that many of the stories shared and topics we discuss on this podcast contain disturbing or emotional content, which may be triggering. As I mentioned on my social media accounts, I basically come with a triggering content warning, but with lots of love and compassion. This podcast is conducted in a long-form interview style with the hope of capturing some of the deeper considerations and details around survivors' stories. We also hope to help those on the outside who are caring about survivors in a group of high demand, high control, by sharing their perspective and struggles, and also expert voices intended to help us unpack some of the complicated considerations around topics related to cults. In our last few podcast episodes, I'd like to also let people know that you can find more information on my website about an offering that I will be releasing soon for those who have experienced coercive control or who are looking for somatic reconnection to themselves. So if you're curious about somatic work or feel that you could simply use an hour of time with yourself in a connected way that is rooted in trauma education and knowledge, please join us. I've designed this to be not just supportive, but also very affordable. And now on to the podcast. Robert Menna is a former international model with a career spanning over 25 years, in addition to being director of Elite Men, a division of Elite Model Management in New York City for several years. As you will hear in our discussion, Bob's father was an advertising executive for over 50 years prior to his retirement. You will understand the impact of this influence on his life as he reflects upon both his father's career as well as his own, and this necessity to both, as Bob would say, quote, wield and understand the process of influence. In 1990, through a confluence of experiences, Bob found himself in a rapid change of personality and thought processes. Around the same time, his then 16-year-old daughter was involved in a group called Ramtha's School of Enlightenment. Some of you may be familiar with Jay-Z Knight, who claimed to channel Ramtha, a 35,000-year-old enlightened being. And Bob's daughter was involved with this group for over 10 years. In the show notes, Bob provides a link for ex-members called Enlighten Me Free. But to find more information on the group, you can easily do an internet search and will certainly find current information as the organization is still functioning. You'll also be able to find information on its leaders and the history of the group. So from that time of his daughter's involvement and continuing on, Bob, as a non-academic, has been involved in researching various aspects of the cultic phenomena. With this deep dive into the field, drawing on his own experiences and that of his daughter and others, he has been able to assist others, including families and former members, in a role that he refers to as an Influence Analyst. In this position, he helps individuals gain insight into the influence at work in their particular situation and how those influences may be affecting them. Bob also does selective pro bono work. His personal interests besides cultic research include people watching, swimming, tennis, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, tap dancing, ski surfing, and roller skating. In the show notes, you will also find a link to what Bob wrote and contributed to the ex-member Ramtha School of Enlightenment forum, which goes into detail about his backstory. And hopefully you'll also get a good feel for this in our interview as well. In addition, Bob presented at the International Cultic Studies Association 2023 conference on a topic titled the short and long-term effects of COVID messaging, and the difficulty in communicating risk. We will also have a link to that in the show notes. It's a real pleasure to introduce you all to Robert Menna. I so appreciate all the details he was willing to share and dive into on topics that are not always easy to speak about. I know this will be helpful to many parents, family members, and of course those leaving these systems of control and deception. Thank you for listening to part 1 of our 2-part discussion. Welcome, Robert Menna, to the Project Hope podcast. It is an absolute pleasure, of course, to speak with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yes, you're so welcome. And I consider Bob to be a special guest as well in terms of being one of the parents of somebody who was in a group. And so we're going to get into that story. So you have that perspective, Bob, but then I personally have found in my, dare I say, friendship with you, that also your own experience that kind of opened you to what was going on with your daughter has also kind of made you a font of knowledge around tactics of influence and persuasion and coercion and all those things. So you are your parent perspective plus, I think.
That sounds good.
So please, if you don't mind beginning, you're welcome to share a little bit with us about yourself present day, and then perhaps just going into the initiation of this story with your daughter.
Yeah, well, present day, I'm living in New York and I'm helping take care of my mom. And I also, my other hat I wear is occasionally I help people who are involved in high demand groups, just as you are, basically from my experience. So I'm just sort of fly by the seat of my pants. And
I think I'd call you like one of our helpers. It's like you're one of the secret helpers out there, I think, that's helping many, many people, but not so much publicly, right? Or with a particular label.
Yeah, that's not, in other words, I'd prefer to have a conversation like this that's just to educate the public too, more than, in a sense, educating someone who has been involved, or they may gain some knowledge. I try and put it in a way that really anybody can understand, rather than complicated, because a lot of it is extremely complicated. So I don't want to just boil everything down to simple, 4-point models or 8-point models. I'm definitely not into that.
But that accessibility that you're talking about is so important, and that really is a gift that you provide, I think. So.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really the first and foremost thing I think that you can provide is, nobody can reach out if they don't know that something is available, or they have an idea in their head of what's available because of what gets promoted in the press and the media and everything else. They think that if there's only one alternative where people come into your house that you don't know and you don't expect, then, that it's that or what, right?
Right. Like you're referring to the kind of exit counseling services or trying to help people.
Yeah. And it's not that I don't believe that they promote to do that. I mean, but that has been a past practice, which is the volume on that is diminishing as we go along, which is good.
Yes.
I just see that there is a constant issue with these groups, types of groups, and that doesn't seem to, the educational aspect of it doesn't seem to keep up.
Yes.
The growth of the groups, which is an indication to me that there's not enough out there in a way that people can absorb and process as far as information goes.
Yeah.
Or it will just, it's not me, they'll look at something because it's so extreme. And to me, this is what happens. Something extreme happens in a group. And if it bleeds, it leads, gets in the media, out come the cult experts, quote unquote experts. And then there's a whole little bubble of information that comes out, which is fairly similar all around.
So true.
Cookie cut. It's almost cookie cutter. And everybody's experience is so individual when they've been put under pressure.
Yes.
Everybody's ability to accept certain pressures is totally different.
Yes. Right.
Unless you're talking the extremes where everybody is literally a cookie cutter person, which is a very small percentage of all the groups that I would consider,
Right. And this is why we see, even in a group like mine, where so many leave and relate to the experience of being in very, very different ways. There's really quite a wide spectrum, I would say, even in terms of those that have left my group, of how people are doing, how it impacted them, how confused they are or not at all about the experience. It's so, you're right. It's just very, very personal in many ways.
Yeah. And sometimes it's difficult to sit and listen to somebody if, they are spouting something that is absolutely false, that they may believe in. But if you can't sit there and really understand that they're not nuts, virtually, all the time. They're not nuts. They're just been exposed to a certain amount of influence, and how they responded to that influence is, on their level, in their amount, in their way.
Yes.
And are you familiar with Bandura?
Bandura?
Yeah, the psychologist, Bandura.
No.
Well, Bandura has the theory of self-efficacy.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So what I see is the cults usually work, not that maybe they have, who knows, but that model, his model of self-efficacy, is how they're working, how the hook gets in. But it's so enclosed in that bubble, and then everything fits after that. It's like a perfect model to show how effective this theory is, and if it's used in a positive manner, rather than for somebody's personal agenda. This is the perfect example of you can use a scalpel as a weapon or a surgical tool. Yeah. So where his theory is actually a great surgical tool for people who are surviving something or have to come back for something, and even somebody who's not and just wants to improve their life, to understand that they make these incremental changes, and, that you follow the cues of the people around you based on how supportive they are of your changes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that part of it's very interesting.
Very, very. And, you know, there are, as you said, there are so many different layers and elements. And I think that's also what makes these groups that aren't in the extreme category sometimes difficult to even talk about or to see correctly from the outside, because there are things that if you describe it, it could be okay in one situation, but it's not okay within the context of that group, right? So it's like meditation, right? Meditation can be very healthy and amazing for somebody. When you're in a group where you're meditating 8 hours a day, that is disconnecting you likely from reality to some extent or another, right? And just perhaps one of the many tools that might be being used to actually.
And then it just goes back to old, grandma's kitchen table wisdom, well, don't do anything to excess, it's like.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the thing about the theory of self-efficacy, because the self-efficacy is one's belief in their capability to meet certain obstacles in their life, and then also not only the personal obstacles, but things that come into their life and affect that they can have an effect on these things. So the person's perception of how much they have an effect on what they're able to affect outside of them. So the groups take this and invert it.
Yes.
So that now you're getting all of the subconscious and uninformed part of the social proofs that are happening all around you with all your members, but you don't understand that you're supposed to search within yourself and find the answers within yourself, and that's what you're told, and you do that, you proceed along those lines. But like you were saying before when we were talking earlier, then that becomes interpreted for you.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to continue on with that experience and build. In other words, you can only build when the leader says it's time to build, it's time for you to move on, it's time for you to get here. Then you're that bit of yourself, every time that happens, is taking that self-efficacy away.
And yet,
even though you can
growing in the
it,
efficacy.
Yeah, right.
You think you are actually growing.
Absolutely. And that is the problem right there.
It's beautiful, Bob, because this particular concept does match so well with every group, but in particular also my group. What's interesting as I'm listening to this is that there was direct hierarchy related to your quote unquote efficacy, right? So the whole thing was actually set up really,
right.
In a controlled manner, of course, that was dictated.
And if you were trying to, operate like this with someone to better them, it would also be in, a sort of controlled way. Except there would be nothing the matter about informing them about what was taking place.
Well, and this is the truth, and that for myself in the group, because the efficacy has labels to it, you really actually, you are doing things that qualify you for that level of efficacy, but it's not natural, right? It's all based on what you are supposed to do or how you're supposed to be.
Well, and the other thing is it's not about your agenda.
Never.
Okay, so self-efficacy is absolutely about your own perception
of
what you can do.
Yeah.
So that's your agenda. That's, what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to build, you're supposed to build on these wins.
Yeah.
Each win that's incremental, you build on it.
Yeah.
And as you, learn and build and move towards this, it's like playing a sport or doing something else. Certain things become second nature. You no longer have to sit there and learn how to do this or do that, or you don't have that block about taking on something that's challenging. Yeah. Or thinking you'll be a failure, because it works in reverse like that. It works in reverse when you perceive yourself as a failure or not meeting expectations, and that's the societal thing around you, that you have not met the expectations. It deflates your feeling of self-efficacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we went into that. Thank you. Yeah. That was really interesting. And
but I guess we should get back, right?
We can.
Okay.
We can journey back to the beginning where it all began.
So I'm a native New Yorker, and I grew up pretty much, I'm in a middle-class family, but when I say I'm a street kid, I was out a lot, I was out a lot. And so I got educated way more by what I saw around me in the city, which is an enormous amount to take in and do.
Educated in the hustle.
Yeah, and I think I related this story to you once before, but when I was about 7, 8, maybe, we had to go in and say what our father did, and my dad was a major advertising executive, which also I should precede. Throughout my life, he always, he was always at the forefront of what was happening in advertising, as far as the psychology and the behavioralism, and, to go in to produce it. And
this is fascinating. So just for the audience, this is this sort of Mad Men era of, for the first time, really using psychology to market products, right?
So he had a 50-year history and worked at all of the big ad agencies, and he was one of the leaders of the cigarette.
Interesting.
And of course, he said, "Don't smoke," and they all, they did know. And meanwhile, they got it out there. But so he always told me what advertising does, how it works on you. So I was well aware of that. But anyway, when he first told me at 7, I said, so what do you do? I got to go tell him tomorrow in school. And he says, well, I get people to buy things that they don't need, that they don't know they need yet. And it just lit up in my head like the key to Fort Knox or something.
The journey around coercion and influence began there.
Yeah. Well, not coercion, but being able to influence people,
and the curiosity around it all.
Yeah. Constantly testing it with people, and I'm a major practical joker, sometimes to my demise. But that's one of the ways that I would practice, right? But so anyway, so I was aware of this ability to do it, and it just became innate. It just became an innate ability. It wasn't that I thought about it. It wasn't that I, wanted to do it. It's just like I had it. So
meaning kind of an influence with people, or that people.
Yeah. So, that makes you a good salesman. It just made life easier because you can maneuver around things easier. And in New York, it's all about faster, quicker, you know. So it's in that aspect, it was beneficial. It probably wouldn't have done me any good out in Montana, you know, but in a urban area like that, it worked. So that's just sort of a background to where I had, and I might just add this because it might explain, you know, how concerned I was when my daughter was brought into this group. That when my daughter was 7, she was involved in a serious car accident where she almost lost her life. You know, so I had already experienced almost losing her.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So the second time was like it's unthinkable.
Yes.
You know, when I was also my career, you know, since I was like 19, 20 until I was into my 50s, was as a model in New York, and I was very successful. And for a couple of years, I was director at one of the major model agencies. And so that was sort of my surroundings for, you know, over a quarter century. And while my daughter was growing up, we had separated, her mom and I had separated when she was about 4. And I had quite a bit of access to her because I had the funds to travel back and forth. Went back with her mom. Her mom was German, and they went back to live in Germany. And so, you know, once we settled everything that it wasn't, you know, so, you know, first because she just left and said, I'm staying, you know.
Yeah.
So there was an initial, you know, wait, you know, no, it's half and half, you know, so I get half. And then I realized that wasn't really going to be tenable. So we had agreed then that my daughter would come every summer and every other Christmas and Easter, and I could see her anytime I wanted, you know, if I went over there. And so I decided that's how I'll fill in the gaps or whatever.
Yeah.
And that worked for about a year. And then it started that, you know, well, she can't come because she's got to do this and that. And then that went on for another year. And I saw that my daughter had these expectations that she would be coming as I did. And then at the last second, you know, it would be, no, you know, I just moving to a new house and I don't want her surroundings change. And so at that point, I figured, I think we need to have, you know, for my daughter's benefit, I felt that we needed to have something more formal.
Yeah.
As an agreement to, you know, where she's going to live. I was also an unmarried father.
Yeah. Okay.
My ex, Susanna, she had been married to an Italian, so she still hadn't gotten a divorce. You know, it took like 10 years to get a divorce or something. And so at one point I told her mom, I think it was when I was an agent, just when I had started being an agent, and I had, you know, you can't work as a model and work as an agent, but I had a couple of contracts that we agreed that I would have to complete. I wasn't going to, you know, not complete I had an obligation to complete them. I had made arrangements. I told her, just send her. She said she can't come over for the summer. I said, well, why don't you just send her over for a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
You know, so I got her to send her over for a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, during those couple of weeks, I had to go to London for a couple of weeks to fulfill the contractual obligation.
Yeah.
So I called my aunt, who I was probably closer to and had a relation with one of my moms. She's my mom's twin sister. And I rented a house out in Southampton. And I gave her the car. And I said, look, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go out there and hang out with Mimi was her nickname. with Mimi. And whatever you do, don't tell my mother where she is. Don't tell my father where she is. Don't tell anybody where she is. Just stay out there and have fun. I'm coming back. I'm going to have to let her mom know while I'm away that she's not coming back until we have some sort of agreement. But she's not with me, but I'm going to have to pretend like she's with me, because I don't want her going and trying to get her when I'm not there and causing some sort of ruckus. It wasn't like and so when I called her, I let her know immediately. I said, I'm not trying to take her away from you. I don't want anything more than what we originally had agreed on. I just need it formalized, so that we know that, our daughter knows what's going to be happening with her. If she doesn't want to come, that's another story, And of course, being a caring mother, she freaked out. And her new husband was an attorney. And so finally she comes over and they're accusing me, they're saying I'm committing larceny and extortion and what was it? Larceny, extortion, and kidnapping. Right. And I had said that that wasn't my intention. I just was very clear with my intentions. That's not it. It's just, how else are we going to do this? I can't do this in Germany. I don't have these same abilities in Germany. I'm here. There's nothing complicated. If there's something there that if you want more than what's there, we can talk about it. But it's whatever it is, we have to do this at this point because the other way just has not been working. And so she comes over. She's got a German lawyer. We go in to the lawyer's office, and my attorney told me I could go in. Don't worry about it. I'm good at handling myself, and she would be there if I needed to call her or whatever. She didn't want to run up my bill, right? And so I go in. The first thing the guy starts saying is, you've committed larceny and extortion and kidnapping, and you must return the child. And I said, you really think I did those things? He said, yes, yeah. And I pushed the phone over to him and I go, call the district attorney. Those are crimes. Those are serious. You think I did those things? Call the district attorney. That's not why I'm here, I'm not here to have you berate me, I'm here to try and find out what's going to be in the best interest of my daughter and get it done. And my thing is that I had said is I'm not keeping her. I can't find her passport. That was the little one. I said, I can't find her passport. So how's she going to travel anyway? I said, I might be able to find her passport. I might remember, if we get this thing done, right? So spend the whole day there. And the only thing that they wouldn't agree to was that this was not signed under duress. And, without that, given the circumstances, I knew that would be very tenuous. I couldn't agree to that. Yeah. So they finally signed. Guy breaks out the schnapps. We all drink it, And I go, oh, wow, I have her passport. This was the jacket I wore at the airport. Here it is. And so her mom goes back with her. And a couple of months later, I get about a 3-inch stack of papers with ribbons and bows and seals. And it's a court filing from Germany. And, a couple $1,000s in translation, I get it back and they're charging me with larceny and extortion and kidnapping and everything else. So I go, oh, well, okay. So I figure I have to go over there and, meet the charges. So I went over, I went around town to see if I can find an attorney who speaks English well enough that I can get along with. And better yet, if I can find one that knows her husband.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
I did find some guy who went to law school with him and wasn't terribly fond of him, didn't hate him, but he wasn't terribly fond of him. I go, you're my guy. So we go to the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor starts jumping up and down and again, you committed the larceny and extortion and this and that. And, I go, look, no, this is my daughter. And then he starts screaming, you are nothing. You are nothing, Mr. Menna. You are nothing, because I'm an unmarried father. And in Germany, if you are an unmarried father, you are nothing. No rights, no nothing. Nothing. And I just, even though he's saying it, I understood what he was saying. I'm going like, well, this nothing is not going away. What are you proposing? You want to bring me to court? Bring me to court. I'll nothing all day, but I'm not stopping. And you brought me here. I said, I didn't bring myself to you. You brought me here, and I'm here, and I'm trying to resolve something. And I think it should be is whatever's in the best interest of the child, and not what's penalizing or punitive for me and my action. And so they proposed that they would put the charges away, sealed, and if I did it again, they would, then bring the charges out again. And I considered it, but I said, I'm not having that hang over my head.
Right.
And I'm not having that part of, my daughter's history. I have no idea what might happen to me tomorrow. And, I can't explain something that's going on. I said, I just can't do it. Yeah. And so I told them to proceed as they wanted, and I'd be going back, and I'd just to wait to hear from, how they want to proceed.
Yeah.
And so I go back, and then I got a call that my daughter had been involved in a serious car accident, maybe a month after that or so.
Oh.
And at that point, my ex, Susanna, had given birth to twins.
Oh, wow.
So she had two twins that then I think were about 7 or 8 months old. So I knew she couldn't really, be there as much as she would have liked to.
Right. Her attention
my
was
daughter. So I just called her. And, well, first I went over right away, but when she got to the hospital, I told her, I said, I'm fine. I'm here.
Yeah.
So all of the kidnapping stuff, it just went right. That wasn't even anything then. So she was in the hospital for maybe a month and a half or 2 months.
Wow.
And I stayed there with her, and it was very painful for her. I mean, this little skinny 7-year-old kid, she had both her femurs broken and her liver pierced by the headlight of the car. She was caught in between 2 cars.
Oh.
So it's very painful for her, very, I'm sure, traumatic experience, because they're poking her every day. They couldn't give her any painkillers because of the type of injury she had, would have caused her more than likely to bleed out and cause respiratory failure.
Oh, my goodness.
So, we got through that. And after we got through that, there was one point when I left, she was going to go to physical therapy and stuff. And I'd check in and how are you doing? And her mom, oh, she's doing fine. She's doing good. And so I think the next Easter, I said, well, why don't you send her over? She sent her over. And I assumed that she was really doing well and stuff. But so when the stewardess brought her down the escalator, and she got off the escalator, and I saw how she was walking, she had this terrible, limp because she couldn't walk because one leg was not straight where it had healed in the thigh. And she couldn't get her knee bent. didn't really bend her knee. So I just called her mom and I said, look, I know you're busy. I said, I can take the time. Why don't you just let her stay here until, I'll bring her to therapy every day.
Yeah.
And, just see it doesn't help, and I can see if I can put her in school here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my old teacher was the principal of the school now, and I went over and I, made a nice donation to the PTA. I said, please just do this for me. Yeah, but she's got a brace on. I said, she will make it,
Yeah. Wow.
And, so she completed the school year there and went through therapy and successfully, broke through what was keeping her from walking and went back to Germany and proceeded to grow up and visit back and forth since then. Then when she was an adolescent, maybe 12 or 30, I'd call up and I'd be 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be going, can I speak? Well, she's not here. And I'd go, well, where is she? Oh, she's with some friends. Where are they? Well, I think I'd be going like, you think, like, how can you not know? It's like, and I try not to be like that, but I would be like that. And ended up through her adolescent years, she was hanging out with kids and doing what kids do when they're kids in the street. She lived in the idyllic country, so she'd go to the city, Frankfurt, and hang out with the city kids. And I think the thing that really, and I kept telling her, I said, you don't know, we don't know what we don't know. We have to face that. It's like, but her mom had sort of a laissez-faire sort of attitude. And I think it was when the police brought her home because she had been caught with some other kids doing graffiti on the trains. And she had to, mom had to pay for the graffiti removal or whatever, and she had to do whatever, then, and I think she recognized that it was a little out of her control. I said, look, why don't you send her if she wants to? I said, before I mentioned it to my daughter, I said, if you want, we can present her with this as an option, if she wants to come and live with me, and we'll reverse all of the travel arrangements and everything.
Yep.
We'll get her into school. My daughter had been interested in being an actress, and I had gone to the High School of Performing Arts.
Ah.
And, I said, yeah, you can always try out, even though I knew what the tryout rate was.
Yeah.
Right. But I said, if you don't get in there, you're going to go to public school. I'm not putting you through private school. But so, she wanted to do that. So she came over.
And for our listeners who grew up in the US, is that is the school that Fame was modeled after, right?
Right. Yeah. And so she comes over and she we find an acting coach and coach her through her audition, and she goes in and she was accepted.
Ah, fabulous.
So she starts school, she's going. She says she's still being a city kid. It's not like she's some sort of angel bookworm all of a sudden, but I believe she was enjoying especially the acting portion of the school, of her classes. And, her teachers thought she had lots of talent.
Yeah.
And then now we'll get to my part of the story. So that's a sort of backstory of where she's at right now. She's about, she came over when she was about 14 and a half or 15. No, maybe 14. And then that was her first year in there. And so her freshman year was fine. And she was in her senior year, not senior year, sophomore year, I believe it was, when this whole incident occurred.
Yes.
So all the time while I was modeling, and also while I was director of an agency, I had a colleague who was named Charles Williamson. And he was a successful model.
Yeah.
And he was always a very boisterous, charismatic, humorous sort of character. I had been aware that he had been involved with the group Rajneesh.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I was an agent, I actually did, I sort of raided from some of the other agencies. I cherry picked out of the other agencies to bring a bunch of people to the agency. And he was one of the people that I recruited and cherry picked.
Yeah.
And so this occurred while he was, one of my clients.
Yeah. And just for the audience, Rajneesh is also the Osho group. And because people might be familiar with just, things that are in the zeitgeist right now, the movie Wild Wild West, which is a docuseries about that group.
So this was taking place during that time that series was portraying. So he started going around to, started wearing the orange garb that the Rajneeshis do, with the, picture of Rajneesh around their necks. And he started going to his bookings and go-sees like this, and then I had to sit him down. And, people are calling, going, hey, what is this? I mean, New York is open to a lot of strange things, even within the modeling industry. But, this one kind of, hey, Bob, what are you sending me over? What? And so I had to sit him down, and I tell him, I say, look, I get it. In a perfect world, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. I said, but this is not how it works in this business. He says, this is definitely going to affect your business. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to hopefully make you money. And I don't want to try and be dishonest with you and tell you that I think I'm going to be able to do this when I have this that I have to contend with. And I say it's a difficult conversation. It is, I feel it's my obligation to let you know. And at first he was, now I want my new name. I want to be known as Bodhananda. I don't want to be known as Charles Williamson anymore. Unfortunately, I said, look, let's start with let's not have Bodhananda from Charles Williamson. And I explained to him, it's a name recognition thing. And so I forget how long he had spent like that until his business was basically all close to non-existence. And then, he stopped sort of going. But so that's brings you sort of the past history that I had known him over these 15 years or so prior to this 20 years. So not that we were close friends, but we often spoke whenever we were working together, or, it wasn't like we'd go hang out together.
Right.
The only thing we did do together were take a series of self-defense courses that I took for maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
That, he was also involved in, and he was actually the protege to the teacher.
Yeah.
These were his method was a method that he had devised from many different martial arts. And what it was just called a self-defense class. And it was basically only about knowing more yourself about what it is that you are going to be defending. When do you defend something? Why would you want to? People don't know when it's time to defend themselves, and they may not be actually ready because of the panic or the, stress or whatever of the situation. So this is sort of a way to bring yourself to these stressful places so that you can understand them physically, what it feels like. So they were a series of, there were no striking blows or kicking or no physical contact between members ever.
Interesting.
And it was more about doing the exercises and processing the exercises. So the exercises were basically push-ups, sit-ups, plies, jumping, and that's really about it. Each one of these things had a specific form, which made them inherently way more difficult than one would normally think of a regular push-up or sit-up or a plie. And so you start off already, it's, something you think you should be able to do, because, if you were there first and they said, okay, do, 5 push-ups, you go, that's not weak. Hey, no, you have to hold like this and do this and do this, do this, X, Y, this. And what it was about was
exhaustion. You're pushing the body to exhaustion.
Yes. It was about pushing your body to exhaustion.
Yeah.
So they were isometric. So you would start off, using all of your muscles as much as you possibly can. The idea is to get to the point where you can't.
Yeah.
And then the exercise begins. It doesn't begin until you get to the point where you can't. So, if you want to sit there and have to do 10 or 20 or 30, go ahead, whatever it takes. Nobody did that. We got the point, and the point is that you start off, you put everything you have into it.
Yeah.
So the push-ups started on the up, not on the down. So you'd have to, lower yourself in this specific form very slowly and, until you sort of manipulate the rest of your body to get down. And then when by the time you're down, you may be almost gone. And then you have to get back up, and you get back up, and, so you do 2, 3 of these, and, sometimes you just give up, and it's not like you've done bad. It's just like you recognize that, I did give up.
Yeah.
I gave up. And it's, you want to know why. Why did you give up? Did you have more juice? And you always have more juice.
Human body is incredible.
Yeah, you always have more left. So hypothetically, right, if you were able to just go and start the exercise, and you exhausted yourself just at that moment, starting it, that would have been good. You never even completed it, right? And occasionally, I wouldn't be able to get up from the first one. I'd try, but couldn't make it. And so, and then when you don't, and you're through, you're right asleep. You go right to sleep. It's not like you pass out. You actually just go right to sleep. You're just exhausted.
Huh.
And, the instructor would let you sleep for 2, 5 minutes, whatever. And then, gently, stir you out of your sleep. And, we'd move on to the next exercises or whatever. Sometimes the classes, usually if it was a class, there were 6 or 7 other people, and most of the people were in the modeling industry or something, so it was like we all sort of knew each other.
Yeah.
But I took quite a few classes just one-on-one with Dwight too. And they would last from anywhere from 2 hours to sometimes 6 hours.
Wow.
And there was no set sort of schedule. And so I had 4 or 5 years of experience with this. And also he was Dwight's protege, right? So he was as committed to this as he was committed to Rajneesh.
Yeah.
So segue into out of the model industry. Now my daughter's in town and living with me and going to school. I, at the time, have an architectural woodworking company, and I think I was on a project building about 53-inch thick, 9-foot tall mahogany doors for a restaurant that was opening, a buddy of mine. And so I ran into him in the street, and I hadn't seen him for years, and asked him hi. We had some coffee, and I asked him, what's the story with Dwight? And he told me that Dwight had passed away. Yep. And we started talking, and he asked me why I would leave the class. Because I'd tell Dwight sometimes, because each time you have to go, it really doesn't make sense unless you're going to go forward more than you were the last time. I mean, even though sometimes that might happen, right? But it's like if that is happening or there's some sort of plateau, I would tell the teacher, I said, look, I just need some time away because I need to process what's been happening. I feel like I'm sort of getting caught up in just the process of the exercise. So I'm not having enough time to really think about how it's affecting me and everything else. Mm. And he was right away, absolutely, don't worry about it. Come and go as you please, right? Mm. So he asked me about why I would do that, because he was, he could not miss a day. Yeah. He would have beat himself up too badly.
Yeah.
And I told him, just like I told you. And then he says, well, would you like to start taking the classes again with me? And I wasn't objectionable to taking the classes, and I knew he had the skills. And so I said, yeah, but what I'd like to do is this. I'd like to offer you in return to barter you classes, because I knew he had always had a terrible fear of the water from being on location jobs with him. He couldn't get in a pool, Yeah. And I said, I'll teach you how to swim, because I have been a swimming instructor, and I really can teach people that you would think would never know how to swim.
Yeah.
And with all kinds of phobias, right? So, but he had a very strong phobia. So, it was his first time in the pool. He was shuddering and shaking. He couldn't even move. And so we agreed to proceed like this.
Yeah.
So I started taking the exercises with him one-on-one. He wasn't in good financial shape then. And so I said, look, I'm doing this job. You can come over to the shop. I can give you something to do. And, I had stuff set up that was in, using jigs and, kind of foolproof stuff that just needed mechanical muscle sort of work.
Yeah.
That he was fantastic at, because he worked just like a machine and with an intensity that's, and the intensity comes from probably not only the classes, but now the new intensity of, what he was learning now and had alluded to, but never told me what it was, something that he's learning. So the exercises were the same. They were identical. Only about a week, 2 weeks into the exercises, he says, I've learned something new that Dwight didn't know. And he said, that is, instead of falling asleep during, while after you've exhausted yourself, make yourself stay awake so you can remain in that state. That's the state that you're going to be learning. And that's all he said.
Okay.
And so, I found that fairly easy to do, but immediately I'm in a altered state. And best way I can describe it is when you're trying to fall asleep and you sort of like snap awake, there's like this in-between state for a millisecond. So it was that state that stretched out for maybe anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And after these classes, it's very hard to, you don't just get up, you have to sort of drag your body to some sort of position where you can rest, a variety of them before you can actually get your muscles back working to get up. Mm-hmm. So during that time, we talk or whatever. And he always had some sort of esoteric bent, but it was one day where I think, pretty sure it was something he asked me about my girlfriend or taxi driver. I forget, but it was something like, I said, they pissed me off or something. Yeah. And then he said, well, did they piss you off or are you pissed off? He said, go back to that place during the exercise and look at it from there. And bingo, I'm back in an altered state now, examining about this situation that should have been just a normal thing. I mean, it shouldn't be something you have to, go into some altered state, but that never crossed my mind. I'm in it now, I'm in it and self-examining, searching for quote unquote, my part in it. Yeah. And so somehow I actually imbibe something through this. At this point, he's coming home to our house and he's eating meals there because he doesn't have any money, or he doesn't have much money. He's saving his money. And during this time and during the meals, he starts talking about various things that I was very familiar with, conspiracy theories and this stuff that I heard about and followed in the 70s, and this is now the 90s. So, and I followed all of that stuff with interest and usually ended up at some dead ends and, just chalk it up to, maybe you don't know, maybe you'll never know. It's okay. What difference, I've taken it as far as I can take it. And so I would challenge him on some of these things. And I thought it was okay in front of my daughter. I didn't think it was bad that she was being exposed to these ideas or these things, especially if they're being challenged logically in front of her. But he is a charisma. That doesn't take away from his charisma and his person, which I think she was impressed by. And so this is how she came into contact with Bo. We will call him Bo because that's how she knew him, and the rest of the people at Ramtha's School of Enlightenment knew him. Yeah. So at one point, she asked me if she could take the classes. And I remember so distinctly when she said that, I felt panicked.
Wow, Bob.
And as soon as I felt panicked, was immediately, and this was what was happening to me, not just in that instance. This was happening to me with my girlfriend at the time. I was having friends kind of look at me like a little strange when I talk about some things. And so immediately I'm into this self-examining role of, well, why should this bother me? Why is this affecting me that she asked me that? Why should this affect me? And he was, I believe he was 40 something then. Yeah, I think. And she was 16 years old.
Yeah.
And I have run through the list. Is it because he's older? Oh, is it because he's black? Oh, is it, well, what is it about me? How am I viewing it? Well, my father was 30 years older than my mother. And, no, I didn't care if he's black or pink or whatever, And so why is this bothering? Must be something with me. And I said, okay. And apparently we did take a couple of classes together. And, I've spoken to her about it. And they're like, if there's just a glimmer of memory of it, it's almost like I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But she says, yes, I was,
Yeah.
And so that was her introduction to him. So then she would go and take a class with him. And within maybe, this is about 2 months, maybe on, or 3 months into me taking the classes.
Yeah.
Probably, I think it was within 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, I find out that they are an item. And again, it's just like gut-wrenching punch, on this realization. And again, I'm thinking, what is this about? I mean, it's not like the automatic thing of this 46-year-old guy. I've known this guy for 20 years, and now he wants to be with my 16-year-old daughter. That doesn't exist. I mean, it existed for a millisecond, right? But then it just goes away, and it's like, what's the matter with me?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to shake this off. And probably a week or two later, she comes back and she says she wants to drop out of school. And it's the same thing, except now I'm differentiating a little bit. I just understand that I don't understand, And, I try and get her to explain herself. She was absolutely, her vocabulary was nil. It was simply because I want to. I know. The no is the big no in quotes. I know I want to.
Yeah. That certainty.
And I could not, talk to her. I call up her mom. I tell her, this is what's happening. I guess she's talked to her mom about Bodhananda. I'm not sure, but that wasn't the issue. It was more the issue with just her wanting to leave school, while she's successful.
Yeah.
And so she wants to leave school. I ask her mom, please come over, so we can face this together.
Yeah.
So her mom comes over, we try to speak with her. We spent maybe a week or two, and it wasn't effective. I think her mom also tried taking classes with Bodhananda to, that's what my daughter wanted her to do.
Yeah.
And and then find out that she wants to go to Yelm, Washington, which is the headquarters of Ramtha's School of Enlightenment. It is not a commune, but everyone in the town probably was it was a small population of maybe uh, 5,000, 4,000, 5,000, and the school produced, probably 1,000 to 2,000 people around the community. So,
wow.
And what is the school exactly, Bob?
What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, anybody that wants to know what they say they are, you can go to ramtha.com. I'd prefer that you see actually what they proclaim. I'll tell you what I think, and if you think it's different or something else there that I might have missed, okay. It has a few tenets, and the one is that, first of all, Ramtha is a 35,000-year-old warrior from Lemuria who was enslaved by the Atlanteans and led a bunch of people into battle. And eventually he got wounded in battle, a sword wound that was mortal. And he went and sat on a rock for 7 years and contemplated his existence until he became enlightened and was able to leave his body and become a god. So now Ramtha appeared to this woman who is the head of the corporation that runs Ramtha School Enlightenment, J.Z. Knight, came to her at one point in her kitchen as an apparition while she was making cardboard pyramids to try and see if they could do pyramid power over fruits or over razor blades, make them sharper, or because that was supposedly possible if you made a perfect pyramid.
Yes.
And she took one and put it on her head, and that's when Ramtha appeared before her as a 9-foot tall, coppered skinned, glorious warrior male.
Okay.
And she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he told her, "I've come to bring you out of the ditch." And so her relationship with Ramtha becomes that Ramtha tells her she needs to start a school so she can, teach people. And what he wants to teach people is that they are God. That, all of the other religions have been fooling them, trying to suppress this fact, and that they are God. So you're going to learn that you are God. And being part of being God is having the ability to manifest whatever you desire in your life.
I am very familiar with that one.
Yeah. And so that's a very powerful, sale, I mean, for me, I never, even though I was affected by the philosophy, I would have never, that's the interesting part, is how it worked more like a virus than it was a recruitment. It wasn't as if I was I wasn't being recruited by him.
Yeah.
Though he probably would have accepted it if I believed it, but he wasn't actively recruiting me or trying to get me into a state where I would release my daughter to him or something. That wasn't his motivation. His motivation was that he's working on this thing to try and be a god, and have, and then there's always the sovereignty issue, the self-sovereignty,
Yeah.
So in order to learn how to be a god, you need to learn how to achieve. The idea is also you're going to be achieving super consciousness.
Yeah.
So there's a series of exercises that they do at the school. Quite a few of them are done blindfolded. There's quite a lot. Sometimes there's quite a lot of very loud music played. They do exercises blindfolded, like they draw cards of what they want, little index cards. They draw on it a picture of what it's on. And then she lived on a farm. So there was a horse paddock. She has like a 14 or 15,000 square foot chateau mansion in the middle of a 5,000 population place. I mean, it's very out of place, but that's how she lives. But then they also have
I have seen some of the pictures.
Field and the horse paddock.
Yeah.
So they'd all go out in the field, and that exercise is called field exercises. So they'd go out in the field and do these exercises where you would put your card face down on a fence. So there's, hundreds or thousands of these cards on the fence. You go back, they spin you around or whatever, and it's like pin the tail on the donkey. Okay.
Right.
And then you go around trying to find your card. And when you get to the fence, you look at the card. If it's not your card, you put it back down, and you go back and you start again.
So they're basically training and honing skills that they believe is a motion toward enlightenment or self-realization.
Absolutely, yeah.
Refinement, perfection into this kind of ideal, godlike human state.
The other one that they do is they set up a labyrinth, with tunnels and twists and turns, where you're supposed to be able to go in blindfolded, actually duct taped over your blindfold to make sure you don't take it off.
Yeah.
And you go through with, again, hundreds of people in the maze. And you're not supposed to be touching the walls or anything to give you any cues on how to go so that you can reach the void.
Yeah.
What most of the people don't know or didn't know when they were there is the void could be and would be manipulated by people under Ramtha's, or let's say Jay-Z's instructions.
Yeah.
If you had a lot of money, you make it to the void. You're one of the people that, they lift up the little panel when you're in the void, but you'd never know that you had help getting in there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So there's that. They do blindfolded archery. But the major thing that they do, and it's like the first class that you take, it's the 101, Ramtha 101, is you learn how to do C&E. And C&E is the trademark. See the trademark there, please. Mm-hmm. Is the trademark exercise of RSE. It's a breathing exercise. I don't know are you familiar with Stanislav Grof?
No.
Holotropic breathing.
Oh, yes.
It's sort of like the Agni fire breathing.
Yes, and I'm very familiar with breath work. I do a lot of breath work personally, and I'm, in my Kundalini yoga training, there's a huge focus on intensified breath work. So I'm also very familiar with what that does. Yeah.
So this is essential to their process, except, it's, and then you hold your hands like this and you breathe out and get it. And produces a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
And, also makes you very suggestible.
Yep.
Afterwards. I mean, some people actually listen to, direction as they do it. Some people listen to music when they do it. And so you're also supposed to be, having whatever it is that you want, holding whatever it is that you want in your mind and direction and focus and intention and, you have to do that with complete integrity, to really make it work. So, and I believe it's 3 times a day.
Oh, okay.
Was the amount. But I to my knowledge, and in talking to people who are involved, have been involved, it's like a church or something. If you say you need to pray, and then somebody thinks, okay, I'll pray. It can't hurt to pray more, right? So it's one of those things that could easily be overdone. In other words, if it's not happening for you like you like, you must have done something wrong or not enough.
It's your fault in terms of your manifestation.
And it's quite a bit of that is portrayed that it is your fault.
Yeah.
And you need to accept the responsibility that it's your fault. And I don't believe they would ever say fault.
Yeah.
But it's, you haven't touched your knowingness.
Right.
However it is that you might want to sugarcoat it.
Right.
In the end, it's your fault. It has nothing to do with the teachings. Couldn't be that there's a problem with the direction of the breathing or the direction or why we have to be blindfolded 2/3 of the time, and so besides that, Ramtha comes in at these events and lectures.
Oh.
These lectures could go on for 6, 12, 14 hours at a time, with 1,000 people or 1,500 people. And so Jay-Z channels Ramtha.
Yeah.
So she goes through a process where she changes from Jay-Z to Ramtha. And then when Ramtha comes out, it's a whole nother persona. She's got this thing that she does. She knows how to sort of squeeze up her neck. She'll say looks more masculine, and she takes a stand like from the King and I, greetings, and so
for the listeners, you can get a look online for your viewing pleasure.
Yeah. Just Google Merv Griffin.
Right.
And Ramtha. There's a very interesting early clip of her doing it on TV.
I've seen that.
So, and no one should laugh at anybody sitting there, looking at this, because number one, they've all been prepared. They've all been prepared for what they're going to see. Usually they've already spoken to somebody that says, oh, you can feel the love from Ramtha, So you're going through all of these exercises, all of these things. You're maintaining this suggestible state the whole time there. You're soaking in all the peer approval. You're feeling completely different than you've ever felt in your life. And Ramtha, you can feel the love when he comes in. You can probably feel it now from me as I'm speaking about it. But so you're prepped for it. And it's like a magic trick, because you do that in magic. You prep people where they're not aware that they're being prepped. They don't know how they're being primed to listen to something or thing. And she talks about a lot of, she rails against, she sets you up against, why this is not a religion and how all the other religions are,
false
or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, that they are part of Ramtha's army.
Okay.
They were in a past life. That's how they found their way there.
Right.
So it starts to firmly establish this familial.
Yes.
They let you know that everything that happens here is secret. This is special. This is after the mystery schools. This is modeled after the ancient mystery schools. We're not teaching on something new. We're teaching something secret and old that nobody's ever brought you before.
Yeah.
And so you have that elite feeling that you're learning something very special. You're feeling it in your body. It's would be almost undeniable if you were in that environment.
Yeah.
And people listening might be going, come on, how could people go for this and go like this? And the thing is this: it's not about the people, it's about the mechanics around what's happening and the dynamics that are produced. And if they are produced for someone else's agenda, the amount of influence that they bear and can bring on anyone, is enormous. It's unthinkable.
Yeah.
And so it would be very easy, the same way you might get caught up in a rock concert or something. You get caught up when you have something that's exciting and going on. And the way she portrays this stuff using the pseudoscience that the majority of the people don't understand, quantum physics or quantum mechanics or astronomy, so she ties the pseudoscientific part of it, and they had someone there who would explain to them how they're changing their brains. So they're literally telling them that they are changing their brains, and they literally are. They are, but they're not telling them really that we're changing your brain so we get more money in our pockets. It's not a altruistic motive. And interestingly enough, the guy who used to teach the brain science was a chiropractor named Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I definitely have.
Yeah. So that's the roots of Dr. Joe.
That's really interesting because I kept, as I was reviewing some Ramtha Jay-Z Knight content, I kept thinking about that being somewhat of an evolution directly into the blow up of The Secret. And I think Joe Dispenza was in The Secret, perhaps.
No, he was in What the Bleep Do We Know?
Oh, that's right. Right. Okay. So he kind of came after that.
Did you see What the Bleep Do We Know?
I definitely did. And I was in my cult when I saw it. So we started hosting movie nights to invite people in.
Oh, you were part of the Bleep. That was an orchestrated thing to get people into the weekly night, but that was a recruitment tool, right?
And we were told, basically, we ended up, the crew that I was with in San Francisco, we were actually told by our leader, and of course, we don't fish in other people's ponds, but why don't you guys all go to the opening of What the Bleep Do We Know, and be sure you have our flyers and some of my books.
Oh yeah, they are fishing, right? Not only they fishing, they're hoping to throw a stick of dynamite in and all the fish will float up. Right?
Oh my gosh. Well, and I guess the reason, the connection, my little landing pad of The Secret, was because I believe the woman who was the originator of The Secret also was channeling. I forget who she was.
Yeah.
So that's why
she wasn't channeling the way Jay-Z channeled, she didn't.
Oh, I think that's Esther Hicks.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes. So.
But what was interesting was, I went to see the movie, and, by now I have very in-depth knowledge. It's maybe, when did that movie come out?
I think
Before 2000 or somewhere around 2000?
think it was 2006-ish.
Oh, maybe it was. My daughter was already out. That's right. And so I'm watching. I go to the premiere and I watch it, and I listening to the physicist part. As how they're describing, how this quantum mechanically works.
Yes.
How you create reality, through, and they're using quantum mechanics to validate, that this happens, that this is actually a thing that happens. When you're the observer, you can't tell where the electrons over here or over there. You can't know the location and the speed at the same time, simultaneously. There's no way you don't know it. So, and they think that this is like a big unknown thing when, really in quantum mechanics, it tells you that things are known, that you can know. You just can't know these two things simultaneously, but that doesn't mean that you don't know anything. And so I see a physicist there that I was familiar with his work, and he's like, I'm like, how did he make it into this movie? How did he make it into that? And, I watch this thing, and the movie's over. I just get out the internet and I find out what school he's teaching in now. I write him a little note. I say, would you mind giving me a call? When I saw the movie, I'd just like to discuss it with you. And so we speak, and I go, I don't get it. How could you, agree with this sort of conception when I know it's not your view? And he says, they just took everything I said and edited it creatively. And I spent close to 7-8 hours telling them why this was not correct in the nicest way that I could, right? But they just edited me, and that's how it turned out, and I regret it. And I go, yeah, even scientists need agents, That's what an agent's for.
Spoken by somebody from the industry.
But this is typical of the behavior of the group, where they would lead someone on that this is a serious undertaking, and yet then, butcher what they really said to fit their agenda, that they would actually do that, just because they can, because the guy signed the release or whatever. And this is one of the other things about the school. In order to go to the school, you sign an agreement. And it's basically, it's a secrecy agreement. We'll call it a non-disclosure agreement. But this is a pretty heavy secrecy agreement that you promise not to reveal any of the disciplines or teach them or let anybody know what's going on, basically, at the school.
We so hope that you enjoyed this episode. These podcasts were edited by Nathan Lemke. If you'd like to work with him, please reach out to me and I will put him in touch with you. And please stay tuned for part of Leaving the Cult, the Season 2 song written by Jaya Suri. And for all things related to Jaya, her music, ways that you can support her, check out the show notes.